The sun was setting over Pine County as Officer Joe Miller drove his police car down the empty road. It was Friday evening, and Joe had been working since early morning. He was tired and looking forward to going home. The trees on both sides of the road made dark shapes against the orange sky. Fall was coming and the air was getting cooler. Joe had been a police officer for 15 years. At 42, he knew every road in Pine County and most of the people who lived there. Nothing much happened in this small part of northern Minnesota. Most days he helped people with small problems, broken down cars, lost pets, or neighbors, arguing about noise. As Joe's car went around a bend in the road, his headlights caught something moving at the edge of the woods. At first, he thought it was a deer. Many deer lived in these woods, and they often crossed the roads at dusk. But as he got closer, Joe saw it wasn't a deer at all. It was a small person, a child, running out of the trees. Joe hit the brakes hard. The tires made a loud noise on the road as the car stopped. The child, a boy, was waving his arms wildly. Even from inside the car, Joe could see the boy's face was dirty and had cuts on it. His clothes were torn and covered in mud and leaves. What in the world? Joe said to himself as he quickly opened his car door. He left the headlights on so he could see better in the growing darkness. The boy ran to Joe. He looked about 10 years, old, and was breathing hard like he had been running for a long time. When he reached Joe, he grabbed the officer's arm with both hands. "Please help," the boy said in a voice that was rough and quiet. "They have my mom and my sister. Please help us." Joe felt his heart beat faster. In 15 years as a police officer, he had learned to tell when someone was really scared. This boy wasn't just scared, he was terrified. "Slow down, son," Joe said, putting his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Who has your mom and sister?" The boy looked back at the dark woods with wide eyes. "Bad men. 3 of them. They took us from our tent. I got away, but Mom and Emma are still there." Joe helped the boy to the police car and opened the back door. "Get in where it's warm. What's your name?" "Ethan," the boy said as he climbed into the car. "Ethan Wright." Joe got a blanket from his trunk and gave it to Ethan. Then he got in the driver's seat and turned on the inside light so he could see the boy better. Ethan was shaking, and Joe wasn't sure if it was from cold or fear. Probably both. "Ethan, I'm Officer Miller. You can call me Joe. I'm going to help you, but I need to know more about what happened. Can you tell me?" Ethan pulled the blanket tight around his shoulders. His face was thin and pale under the dirt. His brown hair was full of small twigs and leaves. "We were camping. Me, Mom, and Emma. We go camping every year after school starts. Dad used to come too, but he died 3 years ago." Joe nodded and wrote this in his notebook. "Where were you camping?" "Eagle Point, by the lake." "We got there on Wednesday. Today is Friday, right?" Ethan asked, suddenly looking confused. "Yes, it's Friday," Joe said. He knew Eagle Point. It was a small camping area about 10 miles from where they were now. "What happened at the campsite, Ethan?" Ethan's eyes filled with tears, but he wiped them away quickly. "It was last night. We were all asleep in our tent. I woke up because I heard Mom talking to someone. She sounded scared. When I opened my eyes, there were men in our tent. They had lights on their heads like miners wear, and they had guns." Joe felt a cold feeling in his stomach. This was no lost camper situation. This was something much worse. 3 men, Ethan continued. They told Mom not to scream or they would hurt us. They tied her hands with rope. Emma woke up and started crying, and one of the men covered her mouth. They took us out of the tent and made us walk through the woods for a long time. Emma was crying, and Mom kept telling her everything would be okay. "Did you know where they were taking you?" Joe asked. Ethan shook his head. "It was dark. We walked for hours. Finally, we got to a cabin in the woods. It was old and looked empty, but there was a light inside. They took us in and put us in a room with no windows. They tied Mom to a chair and put Emma on a bed. They put me on another bed and tied my hands too." Joe tried to keep his face calm, but inside he was getting more worried. "What did these men look like, Ethan?" "They wore masks at first. Black masks that covered their whole face, but after we got to the cabin, they took them off. One was really tall with a beard. One was fat with no hair on his head. The third one was smaller with glasses and bad teeth. Joe was impressed with how clearly Ethan remembered these details, even though he was scared. "Did they tell you why they took you?" Ethan shook his head again. "They didn't talk to us much. They gave us some water and crackers. The man with glasses stayed in the room to watch us while the others went to another part of the cabin. I could hear them talking, but not what they said." "How did you get away, Ethan?" "This morning the man with glasses untied me so I could use the bathroom. It had a small window. When he wasn't looking, I opened it and climbed out. I ran as fast as I could. I heard him yelling, but I just kept running. I ran all day. I tried to find the road. I knew if I could find a road, I could get help." Ethan's voice broke and he started to cry. Joe reached back and patted the boy's knee. "You did the right thing, Ethan. You're very brave. Do you think you could find this cabin again?" Ethan wiped his face with the blanket and nodded. "I think so. It had blue window covers. What are they called?" "Shutters?" Joe asked. "Yes, shutters. Blue shutters. And there was an old red truck parked outside. And before they took us inside, I saw a mailbox with numbers on it. Mom always told me and Emma to remember addresses in case we ever got lost. The number was 1752. Joe's hand froze on his notebook. He knew exactly where that was. 1752 Forest Road, the Gardner place. The Gardner brothers, Sam, Ray, and Pete, had lived there for decades. They were strange men who kept to themselves. They sold firewood in town and rarely talked to anyone. Joe had always thought they were odd but harmless. Now he wasn't so sure. "Ethan, you've been incredibly helpful and brave. I'm going to take you somewhere safe now, and then I'm going to find your mom and sister, I promise." Joe called for backup, on his radio. He told his chief about Ethan and what he had learned about the Gardner brothers. The chief said he would call the state police and get a team ready. As Joe drove Ethan to the police station, he kept thinking about Susan Wright and her daughter Emma, held captive by the Gardner brothers in that old cabin. He didn't know why the brothers had taken them, but he was determined to bring them home safely. Looking in his mirror at Ethan, who was now sleeping under the blanket, Joe felt a mix of anger and determination. The boy had shown incredible courage to escape and find help. Now it was Joe's turn to be brave and smart. The Gardner brothers wouldn't be expecting the police to come so soon. That gave Joe and his team an advantage. They would use it to save Ethan's family. As the police station came into view, Joe made a silent promise to Ethan. He would not rest until Susan and Emma Wright were safe, and the Gardner brothers would learn that in Pine County, you couldn't commit crimes like this and get away with it. Not while Joe Miller was on duty. The police station was busy when Joe Miller arrived with Ethan. Joe had called ahead so everyone was ready. A woman with kind eyes and gray hair was waiting at the door. This was Diane Powell, a social worker who helped children in trouble. "This is Ethan Wright," Joe told her. "His mother and sister are in danger. I need to talk to him more, but he also needs food and maybe a doctor." Diane smiled at Ethan. "Hi there, Ethan. I'm Diane. Would you like some hot chocolate and something to eat while you talk to Officer Miller?" Ethan nodded. His eyes were red from crying, but he wasn't shaking anymore. Joe was glad to see the boy was a little calmer now. They went to a small room with comfortable chairs. There was a table with cookies, sandwiches, and a big mug of hot chocolate. Ethan sat down and wrapped his hands around the warm mug, but he didn't drink. "Ethan," Joe said gently, "I know you're tired and scared, but I need to ask you more questions so we can help your mom and sister. Is that okay?" Ethan nodded, again. "Will you find them soon?" "We're going to try our very best," Joe promised. "First, tell me more about your mom. What's her full name?" "Susan Wright," Ethan said. "She's a nurse at Pine County Hospital. She works in the children's part." Joe wrote this down. "And your sister?" "Emma Wright. She's 6. She's in 1st grade at Pine County Elementary." Ethan's voice got softer. "She's probably really scared right now. She doesn't like the dark." Joe felt his heart hurt for the little girl. "Can you tell me more about the camping trip? When did you start?" "We went on Wednesday after school. Mom took 2 days off work. We were going to come home tomorrow." Ethan took a small sip of hot chocolate. We do this every year in September. Dad started it before he died. What happened to your dad? Joe asked. Car accident. 3 years ago. He was driving home from work when a truck hit his car. Ethan's face showed no emotion when he said this, like he had said it many times before. Joe nodded. He remembered that accident. Frank Wright had been killed when a delivery truck crossed into his lane on a rainy night. I'm sorry about your dad, Ethan. Now, can you tell me more about what happened last night when the men came? Ethan put down his mug. We were all asleep. It was really late. I woke up because I heard Mom talking. She sounded scared. When I opened my eyes, there were 3 men in our tent. They had flashlights on their heads and guns in their hands. Did they say anything to you? They told us to be quiet. One of them, the fat one with no hair, said if we made noise, they would hurt us. Mom told me and Emma to do what they said. Ethan's hands were shaking a little again. They tied Mom's hands with rope. Emma started crying, and the tall one with the beard put his hand over her mouth. They made us get out of the tent and walk through the woods. How long did you walk? Joe asked. It felt like hours. Emma was really tired and kept falling, so the small one with glasses carried her. Mom kept asking them what they wanted. She said we didn't have much money, but they could have it all. They just told her to shut up. While Ethan talked, Joe's boss, Chief Bill Harris, came into the room. He listened quietly by the door. When we got to the cabin, they put us in a room. Ethan continued. It had 2 beds and a chair. They tied Mom to the chair and put me and Emma on the beds. They tied my hands too, but not Emma's. She was too scared to move anyway. Did they hurt any of you? Chief Harris asked. Ethan looked at the new person in the room. Joe quickly said, This is my boss, Chief Harris. He's helping us find your mom and sister. Ethan seemed to relax a little. They didn't hurt us, but they didn't give us much food or water either. Just some crackers and water in the morning. The man with glasses stayed in the room to watch us. The other 2 went to another part of the cabin. Could you hear what they were saying? Joe asked. Sometimes. I heard them talking about the others and about a collection. I don't know what that means. And the tall one with the beard was mad because they didn't get our car. He said they needed the car too. Joe and Chief Harris exchanged looks. This was strange. If the men wanted to rob the family, why didn't they take their car? And what did the others and collection mean? Ethan, did you see anyone else at the cabin? Chief Harris asked. Ethan shook his head. No, but I heard crying coming from somewhere else in the cabin. Not Emma or Mom. Someone else was crying. Joe felt a chill go down his back. There might be other people held captive in that cabin. How did you escape, Ethan? Joe asked. This morning. The man with glasses untied me so I could use the bathroom. It was a small room with an old toilet and sink. There was a little window high up on the wall. When he wasn't looking, I stood on the toilet and opened the window. It was small, but I'm skinny, so I climbed out. Joe was impressed. The boy had been smart and brave. I heard him yelling when he found out I was gone, Ethan continued. I just ran as fast as I could into the woods. I didn't know which way to go, but I thought if I ran far enough, I would find a road or a house or someone who could help. And you ran all day? Chief Harris asked. Ethan nodded. I tried to go downhill because Mom always says if you're lost, go downhill and you'll find water, and where there's water there are usually people. I found a stream and followed it. Then I saw the road and your police car. He looked at Joe with tired eyes. Are you going to find them now? Chief Harris stepped forward. Yes, Ethan. Officer Miller and I are going to get a team together right now. We know where that cabin is, and we're going to go get your mom and sister. Diane, who had been sitting quietly next to Ethan, spoke up. Ethan needs rest. He can stay with me while you organize the rescue. Joe nodded. Ethan, is there anything else you can tell us about the cabin or the men that might help us? Ethan thought for a moment. The cabin had 2 floors. We were on the bottom floor. The room had 1 window, but it was covered with wood on the outside. The door had a lock on the outside. And he closed his eyes, trying to remember. There was a trapdoor in the floor of the main room. I saw it when they first brought us in. One of the men opened it and went down some stairs, but I couldn't see what was down there. Joe wrote all this down. A basement or cellar could be where other victims were being held. This was getting worse by the minute. "Thank you, Ethan. You've been incredibly helpful," Joe said. "Diane will take good care of you while we find your family." As Joe and Chief Harris left the room, the chief pulled Joe aside. "The Gardner brothers. You're sure that's whose place the boy is describing? 1752 Forest Road. Blue shutters, red truck. It has to be them," Joe said. "I've always thought those three were strange, but I never imagined they were dangerous." Chief Harris rubbed his face. "I've called the state police. They're sending a tactical team, but they won't be here for at least 2 hours. The FBI is also coming, but they're even further away." Joe shook his head. "We can't wait that long. If the Gardners know Ethan escaped, they might move Susan and Emma, or worse." He didn't say what he was really thinking, that the Gardners might kill their captives rather than risk being caught. Chief Harris looked at his watch. "You're right. I'll get our deputies together. We can be at the Gardner place in 30 minutes. We'll secure the area and wait for backup if possible. But if we need to go in, we go in." Joe nodded. As they walked to the meeting room where the other officers were waiting, Joe thought about the Gardner brothers. Sam was the oldest, around 50, tall with a beard. Ray was the middle brother, heavy-set and bald. Pete was the youngest, small and thin with glasses. They had lived in that cabin for as long as Joe could remember. They sold firewood in town, fixed cars sometimes, and kept to themselves. Now Joe wondered what dark secrets that old cabin in the woods held, and he promised himself that before the night was over, Susan and Emma Wright would be safe and the Gardner brothers would be in jail. The night was dark and cloudy as 5 police cars drove slowly along Forest Road with their lights off. Joe Miller was in the front car with Chief Harris. Behind them were 8 more officers from Pine County. They had all put on bulletproof vests and checked their guns. This was not the kind of police work they usually did in Pine County, but they were ready. "Stop here," Chief Harris said when they were about half a mile from the Gardner cabin. "We'll walk the rest of the way. We don't want them to hear our cars." The officers got out of their cars and gathered around the chief. The air was cold, and their breath made small clouds in front of their faces. "Listen up," Chief Harris said in a low voice. "We know there are 3 men in that cabin, the Gardner brothers. They have at least 2 hostages, Susan Wright and her daughter Emma. There may be others. These men are armed and dangerous. Our job is to get everyone out safely." Joe looked at the faces of his fellow officers. Some looked nervous, others determined. They were all good cops, but most had never been in a situation like this before. "The state police tactical team will be here in about an hour," the chief continued. "But we're not waiting. We're going to surround the cabin and watch it. If nothing changes, we'll wait for backup. But if we think the hostages are in immediate danger, we go in, understood?" Everyone nodded. "Miller, you know the Gardner place better than anyone. You lead the way," Chief Harris said to Joe. Joe nodded and started walking down the dark road. The other officers followed quietly. They walked for about 15 minutes until Joe held up his hand for everyone to stop. Through the trees, they could see a light. "That's it," Joe whispered. "The cabin is just ahead, in a small clearing. There's the main door at the front, a back door in the kitchen, and probably windows on all sides. The red truck should be parked outside." Chief Harris nodded and started giving orders. "Johnson and Martinez go round to the back. Peters and Wilson take the left side. Lee and Brown the right side. The rest of you, spread out around the front. Everyone stay hidden in the trees. Radio if you see movement. Don't do anything, unless I give the order." The officers moved quietly through the woods circling around the cabin. Joe and Chief Harris stayed together, moving toward the front of the property. When they were close enough, Joe could see the cabin clearly. It was old and made of dark wood. Light came from a few windows. The red truck was parked in front. "There it is," Joe whispered. 1752 Forest Road. Blue shutters, red truck. Just like Ethan said. They found a spot behind a large tree where they could watch the front of the cabin. Joe took out his binoculars and looked carefully at the building. "I can see movement inside," he said quietly. "Someone walking around in what looks like a living room." Chief Harris took the binoculars and looked. "That's Sam Gardner, the tall one with the beard." They watched for several minutes. Sam Gardner moved around the room, sometimes sitting in a chair, sometimes looking out the window. Once he went to a door at the side of the room, opened it, and said something to someone inside. Then he closed the door again. "That must be where they're keeping Susan and Emma," Joe said. His radio made a soft sound. It was Officer Martinez at the back of the cabin. "Chief, there's a cellar door on the ground behind the cabin," Martinez whispered. "It's padlocked, and I can hear something from inside, like someone crying." Joe and Chief Harris looked at each other. This matched what Ethan had said about hearing crying and seeing a trap door. "There are more victims down there," Joe said. Chief Harris nodded grimly. "We need to move fast. If there are people in that cellar, they could be in bad shape." Just then, they heard a car coming down the road. Everyone froze. A pair of headlights appeared, moving toward the cabin. "Who is that?" Chief Harris whispered. They watched as a blue car pulled up next to the red truck. A man got out. It was Pete Gardner, the youngest brother with glasses. He was carrying bags from a store. "He must have gone to town for supplies," Joe said. Pete went into the cabin. Through the window, Joe could see the Gardner brothers talking. Sam seemed angry, waving his arms and pointing at Pete. Ray, the middle brother, was sitting at a table cleaning a gun. "They're all armed," Joe said, "and they look nervous. They probably know Ethan escaped and might have called the police." Chief Harris made a decision. "We can't wait for the state police. Those people in the cellar need help now, and the Gardners might decide to run or do something worse." He spoke into his radio. "All units prepare to move in. On my signal, we surround the house and announce ourselves. If they don't surrender immediately, we go in." The officers around the cabin confirmed they were ready. Joe checked his gun one more time. His heart was beating fast, but his hands were steady. "Remember, there are hostages inside," Chief Harris reminded everyone. "Be careful where you shoot." He counted down from 3, and then all the officers moved out from the trees at once, surrounding the cabin with their guns pointed at the doors and windows. "Pine County Police!" Chief Harris shouted through a bullhorn. "We have the cabin surrounded! Come out with your hands up." For a moment, nothing happened. Then they heard shouting inside the cabin. Through the window, Joe could see the Gardner brothers moving quickly. Ray grabbed his gun from the table. Sam ran to the side door where they thought Susan and Emma were being kept. "They're not surrendering," Joe said, "and Sam is going for the hostages." Chief Harris didn't hesitate. "Go in. Now." Joe and 2 other officers ran to the front door. Joe kicked it hard and the old wood broke around the lock. They rushed inside, pointing their guns at Ray Gardner, who was standing in the middle of the room with his gun raised. "Drop the gun," Joe shouted. "Drop it now!" Ray looked at the 3 police guns pointed at him. Slowly, he put his gun on the floor and raised his hands. Joe could hear the other officers breaking in through the back door and windows. There was shouting and the sound of furniture breaking. "Where's Sam?" Joe asked Ray. Ray didn't answer, but his eyes moved toward the side door. Joe ran to it and tried to open it, but it was locked from the inside. "Sam Gardner," Joe shouted. "Open this door now or we're breaking it down." There was no answer. Joe stepped back and kicked the door hard. It didn't open. He kicked again, and this time the door flew open. Inside was a small bedroom. Sam Gardner was standing by a window trying to open it. Tied to a chair was a woman with blonde hair, Susan Wright. On a bed in the corner, a little girl with the same blonde hair was curled up in a ball crying, "Emma." "Don't move, Sam," Joe shouted, pointing his gun at the tall man. Sam turned around. He had a knife in his hand. "Stay back," he yelled, "or I'll hurt them." Susan Wright looked at Joe with desperate eyes. "Please help us," she said in a weak voice. "Please get my daughter out of here." Joe kept his gun pointed at Sam. "Put the knife down, Sam, it's over. We have Ray. Pete is probably in custody by now, too. There's nowhere to go." Sam's eyes were wild and scared. "You don't understand. You can't take them. They're part of the collection." "What collection, Sam?" Joe asked, trying to keep the man talking while he looked for a chance to get closer. "What are you talking about?" "We collect them," Sam said, waving the knife. "Families. We keep them. They belong to us now." Joe felt sick. The Gardner brothers weren't just kidnappers. They were collecting people, like things. Sam, listen to me, Joe said calmly. This has to stop now. Put down the knife and step away from Susan and Emma. Do it now, and no one gets hurt. Sam looked at the knife in his hand, then at Susan and Emma. For a terrible moment, Joe thought the man might try to hurt them. But then Sam's shoulders dropped. He dropped the knife on the floor and stepped back. They were ours, Sam said sadly. They were supposed to be ours forever. Joe moved quickly. He pushed Sam against the wall and handcuffed him. As soon as Sam was secure, Joe went to Susan and Emma. "Are you hurt?" he asked as he untied Susan's hands. "No," Susan said, rubbing her wrists where the ropes had cut into them. "We're okay. Is Ethan safe? Please tell me my boy is safe." "Ethan is fine," Joe assured her. "He's the one who led us to you. He's a very brave boy." Susan started crying with relief. She stood up on shaky legs and went to Emma, gathering the little girl in her arms. "It's over, baby," she whispered to her daughter. "The police are here. We're going home now." Joe's radio crackled. It was Martinez. "Miller, you need to come. Out back. We found the cellar. You won't believe what's down there." Joe Miller handed Susan and Emma Wright to another officer. "Get them to safety," he said. Then he went outside and around to the back of the cabin. Several officers were standing around an open door in the ground. This was the cellar door that Martinez had found. Someone had broken the padlock. "What did you find?" Joe asked as he approached. Officer Martinez looked pale. "You need to see for yourself. Be careful on the stairs." Joe took out his flashlight and pointed it down into the dark opening. There were old wooden stairs going down. He could smell something bad, like a place that had not been cleaned for a long time. Carefully, he went down the stairs. The cellar was larger than Joe expected. It was made of dirt and stone, with a low ceiling that made Joe have to bend his head. His flashlight showed him a room with several doors along the walls. These were not normal doors, but heavy wooden ones with small windows that had bars on them. They looked like jail cells. "We found 3 people down here," Martinez said, following Joe. 2 women and a teenage boy. They're alive, but in bad shape. The ambulances are on their way. Joe walked to the first door. Inside, sitting on a dirty mattress, was a woman with long brown hair. She looked thin and her clothes were dirty. When the light hit her face, she put her hand up to block it. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Joe Miller from Pine County Police," Joe said gently. "You're safe now. We're going to get you out of here." The woman started crying. "Is this real? Are you really the police?" "Yes, ma'am. It's really over. Can you tell me your name?" "Karen Larson," she said in a weak voice. "I've been here for I don't know how long. What day is it?" "It's Friday, September 20th, Joe told her. Karen's eyes widened. "September? I was taken in July. I've been here for 2 months?" Joe felt anger growing inside him. These poor people had been kept like animals for months. "We're going to get you to a hospital, Karen. Is there anyone we should call for you?" "My husband, Mike," she said, tears running down her face. "He must think I'm dead by now." Joe promised to call Karen's husband as soon as they got her to safety. Then he moved to the next cell. Inside was a teenage boy with dark hair. He was sitting in a corner watching Joe with scared eyes. "Hey there," Joe said. "I'm a police officer. What's your name?" "Jason," the boy said quietly. "Jason Mendez. Are they gone? The men who put me here?" "They can't hurt you anymore," Joe assured him. "They've been arrested. How long have you been here, Jason?" "Since the beginning of August," Jason said. "I was riding my bike home from my friend's house. They grabbed me and put me in their truck." Joe remembered hearing about a missing teenager in August. The boy had disappeared from Oakwood, a town about 30 miles from Pine County. The police had searched for weeks but found nothing. Now Joe knew why. The third cell held another woman. She was older, maybe in her 50s, with gray hair. She told Joe her name was Beth Wilson. She had been the first one taken back in June. She had been walking her dog in the evening when the Gardner brothers took her. "What about my dog?" she asked Joe. Did they hurt him? Joe didn't know what had happened to the dog, but he promised to find out. By now, the state police had arrived. They took control of the scene while Joe and the Pine County officers helped get the victims out of the cellar. Ambulances were waiting to take them to the hospital. Joe watched as Karen, Jason, and Beth were carried out on stretchers. They were all weak from being kept in that dark place for so long with little food, but the doctors said they would recover. Joe went back into the main part of the cabin. State police officers were looking through the Gardner brothers' things, trying to understand why they had done this. Miller, one of the state officers, called. You might want to see this. Joe went over to where the officer was standing. On a table was an old photo album. The officer opened it to show Joe what was inside. Pictures of families, Joe said, as he looked at the photos. Not just any families, the officer said. Look closer. Joe looked carefully at the pictures. They showed different families, men, women, and children, in what looked like normal family photos. But as Joe looked closer, he saw that the people in the photos didn't look happy. They looked scared. And in some pictures, he could see ropes around their wrists or ankles. These are the families they took, Joe said, feeling sick. There are pictures going back at least 5 years, the officer said. And look at this one. He turned to a page that showed a picture of the Gardner brothers standing with a family, a man, a woman, and 2 children. They were all smiling at the camera like they were friends. What is this? Joe asked. We think the Gardners were trying to create some kind of fake family, the officer explained. They would take a family, keep them in the cellar, and then bring them up to the cabin, to pretend they were all living together happily. Joe thought about what Sam Gardner had said earlier. They're part of the collection. The Gardner brothers had been collecting people to create the family they never had. It was sick and sad at the same time. Outside, Joe saw the Gardner brothers being put into state police cars. Ray and Pete went quietly looking at the ground, but Sam kept looking back at the cabin as if he didn't want to leave. They're ours, Sam said to no one in particular. They belong with us. A state police officer pushed Sam's head down as he put him in the car. Shut up, Gardner. You're going to prison for the rest of your life. Joe walked over to where Susan and Emma Wright were sitting in an ambulance. A paramedic was checking them over. Susan looked up when she saw Joe. Officer Miller, she said, thank you for finding us. How can we ever thank you enough? Joe smiled at her. I'm just glad you and Emma are safe, and you should be proud of Ethan. Without him, we might never have found you. Susan started crying again, but these were happy tears. Where is he? Where's my brave boy? He's at the police station with our social worker, Diane Powell. She's taking good care of him. We'll take you to him as soon as the paramedics say you're okay to travel. Emma, who had been quiet until now, looked up at Joe. The bad men won't come back, will they? Joe knelt down to be at her eye level. No, Emma. The bad men are going to jail for a very long time. They can never hurt you or anyone else again. Emma nodded seriously. Then she surprised Joe by giving him a hug. Thank you for saving us. Joe hugged her back, feeling a lump in his throat. In 15 years as a police officer, this was one of the hardest cases he had ever worked on, but it was also one of the most important. Chief Harris came over to the ambulance. The paramedics say Susan and Emma can go to the police station now. I've got a car ready to take them. Joe helped Susan and Emma into the police car. As they drove away, Joe looked back at the Gardner cabin. State police were still going through it, collecting evidence. The house that had hidden such terrible secrets for years was now exposed to the light. You coming, Miller? Chief Harris called. Joe nodded and walked to the chief's car. They had a long night ahead, with reports to write and questions to answer. But the most important thing had been done. The victims were safe and the Gardner brothers would face justice for their crimes. As they drove back to Pine County, Joe thought about Ethan Wright. A 10-year-old boy had shown incredible courage today. He had escaped from dangerous men, found help, and saved not only his mother and sister but 3 other people as well. Some heroes didn't wear uniforms or carry badges, Joe thought. Sometimes, they were just ordinary people who did extraordinary things when it mattered most. 6 months had passed since the night Joe Miller found the Wright family. It was now spring in Pine County. The trees were getting green leaves again, and flowers were starting to bloom. The Gardner brothers case was no longer front-page news, but the people of Pine County still talked about it. Joe parked his police car in front of Pine County Elementary School. He was not working today. He had come to see a special event. As he walked into the school, parents and teachers smiled and nodded at him. Everyone in town knew Officer Joe Miller now. He found a seat in the back of the school gym. The room was full of parents and family members sitting in folding chairs. At the front was a small stage with a piano. On the wall was a banner that said, "Spring Concert." Joe saw Susan Wright sitting near the front. She looked different now. Her hair was cut shorter, and she looked healthier and happier than the last time he had seen her. Beside her was Emma, swinging her legs and talking excitedly to her mother. Susan turned and saw Joe. She smiled and waved, then said something to Emma. The little girl turned and waved too. Joe waved back, feeling happy to see them doing so well. After the Gardner brothers were arrested, Joe had stayed in touch with the Wright family. He had visited them in the hospital the day after the rescue. He had helped Susan with police paperwork and made sure she knew about services that could help her and her children recover from what had happened. The Wright family had moved to a new house in Pine County. They couldn't go back to their old home because it had too many bad memories. Susan still worked as a nurse, but now she worked in a different part of the hospital. Emma was back in school and seemed to be doing well. And Ethan? The lights in the gym dimmed and a teacher walked onto the stage. "Welcome everyone to our spring concert," she said. "Our students have been working very hard and they're excited to share their music with you today. First, our 4th grade class will sing 'This Land Is Your Land.'" A group of children walked onto the stage and lined up in rows. Joe spotted Ethan in the 2nd row. The boy looked different too. He stood, taller, and his face had lost the scared, sad look it had after the kidnapping. He looked like a normal 10-year-old boy again. The piano started playing and the children began to sing. Joe watched Ethan, remembering the brave boy who had appeared out of the woods 6 months ago. That boy had changed Joe's life and the lives of many others. After the Gardner brothers were arrested, police found evidence that they had been kidnapping people for more than 5 years. Besides Karen, Jason, and Beth, there were pictures of at least 4 other families in their photo album. Police in 3 states were still trying to find out what had happened to those people. Sam, Ray, and Pete Gardner were now in prison, waiting for their trial. They would probably spend the rest of their lives behind bars. Their old cabin in the woods had been torn down. No one wanted to live in a place where such bad things had happened. As for the other victims found in the cellar, they were all back, with their families now. Karen Larson had returned to her husband in Pine County. Jason Mendez was home with his parents in Oakwood. Beth Wilson had moved to Florida to live with her daughter. And yes, her dog was fine. A neighbor had been taking care of it while she was missing. The children finished their song and everyone clapped. The teacher announced the next performance, and Ethan's class left the stage. As they walked back to their seats, Ethan saw Joe and gave him a small wave. After the concert, Joe waited outside the gym as families came out. He saw the Wright family and walked over to them. "Officer Miller," Emma said when she saw him. She ran up and gave him a hug. Emma was no longer the frightened little girl from the cabin. She was smiling and full of energy. "Hello, Emma," Joe said, hugging her back. "You can call me Joe, remember?" "Officer Joe," Emma said with a grin. Susan came over with Ethan. "It's good to see you, Joe," she said. "I didn't know you were coming today." "I wouldn't miss it," Joe said. "Besides, I have some news to share with you." "Good news, I hope?" Susan asked. "Very good news," Joe said. "The district attorney called me this morning. Sam Gardner has decided to plead guilty to all charges. There won't be a trial." Susan let out a breath. "That is good news. I was worried about the children having to testify." "None of you will have to go to court now," Joe assured her. "The Gardner brothers will go to prison for life with no chance of getting out." "So it's really over," Susan said quietly. "It's over," Joe confirmed. Ethan, who had been quiet until now, looked up at Joe. Did they ever say why they did it? Why they took people? Joe hesitated. He didn't want to talk about the dark details of the case in front of the children. But Ethan had been through so much and he deserved some kind of answer. The doctors who talked to the Gardner brothers think they had a very sad life growing up, Joe explained carefully. They didn't have a normal family, and it made them want to create one, even if they had to take people to do it. What they did was very wrong, but they were also very sick in their minds. Ethan nodded, seeming to understand. Will the people they took be okay? I think so, Joe said. People can recover from bad things, especially when they have love and support. He looked at Susan as he said this, and she smiled back at him. We're having a picnic lunch in the park, Susan said. Would you like to join us, Joe? I'd like that very much, Joe said. As they walked to the park, Emma held Joe's hand and told him about her school project on butterflies. Ethan walked beside his mother, looking more relaxed than Joe had ever seen him. At the park, they spread a blanket under a big oak tree. Susan took out sandwiches, fruit, and cookies from a cooler. They sat in the warm spring sunshine and ate lunch together. I've been meaning to tell you, Susan said to Joe as the children played nearby. Ethan's therapist says he's doing really well. She thinks he's going to be okay. I'm not surprised, Joe said. He's the bravest kid I've ever met. Susan watched her son playing. He has nightmares sometimes. We all do. But they're getting less frequent. We're healing. I'm glad, Joe said. You have an amazing family, Susan. We wouldn't be here without you, she said, touching his hand, briefly. You're part of our story now, Joe Miller. Joe felt his heart warm at her words. In his 15 years as a police officer, he had helped many people. But saving the right family was something he would always remember. And watching them, now seeing them laugh and play in the sunshine, he knew that even after terrible things happen, life can go on. People can heal and find happiness again. As Joe sat with the Wright family in the park, he thought about the night 6 months ago when a boy had emerged from the woods to stop his police car. That moment had changed everything for many people. It had been the beginning of a dark and difficult journey, but now sitting here in the spring sunshine, Joe could see that it had also been the first step toward healing and hope. For the Wright family, for the other victims of the Gardner brothers, and even for Joe himself, life would never be the same. But different didn't have to mean worse. Sometimes, Joe thought, as he watched Ethan laugh with his sister, different could be the start of something new and good.